You do not have to go to Europe to find a life-changing Catholic pilgrimage, because hidden across the United States are holy places where people have gone with pain and returned with peace, places of healing, places of silence, places where faith feels real. Today, we are counting down the 10 most powerful Catholic pilgrimage sites in America, and the number one destination is so beautiful and spiritually overwhelming. It feels like a glimpse of heaven itself. And we begin in the most unexpected place of all, a hidden spiritual masterpiece in the heart of Iowa that was born from suffering, built with gratitude, and still leaves pilgrims in awe to this day. Number 10, Grotto of the Redemption, West Bend, Iowa. At first glance, this place almost does not seem real. In the middle of a quiet part of Iowa stands an enormous sacred work made from stones, minerals, shells, and countless natural materials, all brought together to tell the story of salvation. It is often called one of the largest man-made grottos in the world, and once you see it, it becomes clear why people remember it for the rest of their lives. There are scenes from the life of Christ, scenes from Scripture, and spaces that guide visitors step by step through the great story of faith. But what makes the Grotto of the Redemption so powerful is not only what it looks like. It is the reason it exists. The story begins with a promise. Father Paul Doberstein became seriously ill with pneumonia as a young priest. In his suffering, he prayed to the Blessed Virgin Mary and made a vow. If he recovered, he would build a shrine in her honor. He did recover, and he did not forget. What followed was not a quick project or a small offering. It became the work of his life. For more than 40 years, he gathered materials and shaped them into something lasting, something sacred, something that would help others pray long after his own earthly life was over. That is what gives this place such weight. It is not merely a monument to craftsmanship. It is a monument to gratitude, devotion, and a promise kept. When people walk through the grotto, something begins to happen. At first, they notice the beauty, the detail, the scale, the sheer imagination behind it all. But as they continue, the heart begins to slow down. The mind becomes quieter. Every scene invites reflection. Every path feels like a call to move more slowly. In a world that constantly pushes us to rush, this place teaches patience. It reminds us that grace often works slowly. It reminds us that beauty can become prayer. A person can spend a lifetime building something for God, and that offering can continue touching souls for generations. There's also something deeply comforting here, because this shrine was born from suffering. Father Doberstein built it from a promise made in sickness and fear. That matters because many pilgrims come carrying their own burdens, their own anxieties, their own pain. And here they are reminded that suffering does not have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it becomes the beginning of something holy. That is why the Grotto of the Redemption belongs on this list. It is not only impressive, it is deeply human. It tells the truth that faith can turn weakness into witness. At number 9 is the Chapel of the Holy Cross in Sedona, Arizona. Few Catholic sites in America are set in a landscape as dramatic as this one. The chapel rises from the red rock cliffs, and the great cross built into its design can be seen from far away. It stands above the desert like a sign that faith belongs not only in old cities and ancient holy lands, but also in the wide, open spaces where creation itself seems to speak of God. There are places where architecture tries to dominate the land. This is not one of them. Here, the church and the landscape seem to belong together. The result is something striking, peaceful, and unforgettable. Even the road leading to the chapel begins to shape the soul. As visitors approach, the red rocks, the open sky, and the desert silence begin to strip away the noise they arrived with. By the time they stand before the chapel, many already feel changed. They feel smaller, but in the best possible way. Not crushed, but humbled. Not lost, but reminded that life is larger than the worries they brought with them. Inside the chapel, the view stretches far beyond the walls. Light pours in, and the desert itself becomes part of the prayer. There is something powerful about looking out across such vast and rugged beauty while also looking inward at your own heart. Many pilgrims say this place helps them breathe again, pray again, and think clearly again. The world often fills us with pressure, and pressure narrows the heart. But here, everything opens. The sky is wide. The horizon is wide. And somehow the soul opens with it. The Chapel of the Holy Cross reminds us that not every pilgrimage site must be ancient in order to be holy. Some places become sacred because they help people encounter God in a real and living way. This chapel does that by joining silence, beauty, surrender, and prayer into one unforgettable experience. It teaches a simple lesson. When you rise above the rush of life, even for a little while, you begin to see what matters again. Problems that once felt overwhelming no longer fill the whole horizon. Prayer becomes less about panic and more about trust. That is one of the signs of a true pilgrimage place. It does not only move you while you are there, it changes how you walk when you leave. At number 8 is Avenue Maria Grotto in Cullman, Alabama. This place feels different from almost every other site on this list, and that is part of its beauty. Tucked into the grounds of St. Bernard Abbey, Ave Maria Grotto is not grand in the way a massive basilica is grand. Instead, it is quiet, touching, creative, and full of wonder. Along a peaceful path, visitors discover more than 100 miniature models of famous Catholic churches, monasteries, shrines, and sacred places from around the world. It is like walking through a tiny Catholic world gathered into one garden. The man behind this remarkable place was Brother Joseph Zoetl, a monk who spent around 50 years building these small sacred models by hand. He did not work with expensive materials or grand equipment. He used what was available: broken items, discarded objects, stone shells, bits and pieces most people would have thrown away. That is what makes Ave Maria Grotto so moving. It is not just charming. It carries a message. It shows that holiness can grow from the ordinary. It shows that beauty can rise from what seems small. It shows that devotion often speaks most powerfully through humble, hidden work. As visitors move from one miniature structure to the next, they recognize holy places they may have only seen in books or heard about in stories. Suddenly Rome feels close. Lourdes feels close. The monasteries of Europe feel close. The Holy Land feels close. In Alabama, a pilgrim can feel connected to the wider church in a deeply personal way. There is a gentleness here that reaches the heart. The grotto does not overwhelm. It does not demand attention. It quietly invites it. Children are often amazed by the tiny buildings. Adults are often touched by the patience it took to create them. And everyone is reminded that some of the most faithful work in the church is done quietly, by people whose names may never become famous on earth. Ave Maria Grotto also speaks to something many people desperately need to hear. We live in a world that throws things away too easily: objects, traditions, time, and sometimes even people. This place offers another vision. It says that what seems broken can still become beautiful. What seems small can still matter. What seems overlooked can still be transformed by love. And that is not only true of objects. It is true of lives. Many pilgrims leave this place feeling that God can still do something beautiful with the pieces of their own story. At number 7 is the Basilica of the Sacred Heart at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. This church stands at the center of one of the most well-known Catholic universities in the United States, but it is much more than a campus church. It is a place where prayer, beauty, intellect, and truth seem to meet in one breath. From a moment visitors step inside, they're greeted by sacred art, rich colors, stained glass, and a peace that quiets the heart almost immediately. It is one of those churches where beauty does not feel like decoration. It feels like part of the message. There is something deeply fitting about a great church standing at the heart of a place of study. It reminds us that faith and reason are not enemies. The mind belongs to God, so it does the heart. In this basilica, a student can kneel before an exam, a parent can pray for a child, a visitor can step out of a busy day and find stillness. It becomes a place where ordinary life and eternal truth touch each other. That matters because so many people feel forced to divide their lives. Work in one box, faith in another, thought in one corner, prayer in another. But the Basilica of the Sacred Heart says no to that division. It says the whole person belongs before God. Its stained glass windows and sacred imagery help make that truth visible. Light pours through the church and colors the interior in a way that feels almost like a living sermon. Without words, the beauty teaches. It lifts the mind and steadies the heart. Many pilgrims who visit this basilica are not students at all. They come because they have heard of its beauty, because they're traveling through Indiana, or because they want to pray in a church that feels unmistakably Catholic. And that is what they find. Even when the campus around it is full of activity, the basilica remains a place of quiet center. That is why it belongs on a pilgrimage list. It reminds us that holiness is not only found in remote shrines. God is also present in the middle of schedules, studies, stress, work, and decision-making. He waits in the center of our daily callings, inviting us to place everything under his light. At number 6 is St. Anthony Chapel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This chapel may not be as widely known in everyday conversation as some larger shrines in America, but once people visit it, they rarely forget it. It is famous for holding one of the largest collections of relics outside the Vatican. For some, relics may seem unusual at first, but for Catholics, they are powerful reminders that holiness is not just an idea. Holiness is lived by real people, with real bodies in real history. The saints were not mythical figures. They were men and women who loved Christ enough to give him everything. When you enter St. Anthony Chapel, that truth becomes tangible. Thousands of relics are present there, each connected to a saint, a martyr, or a witness of the faith. The atmosphere is marked by reverence. People move more slowly. They read names. They begin to feel the long history of the church not as something distant, but as something close. The saints no longer seem like figures from another world. They begin to feel like members of the same family. There is something powerful about that. In today's world, many people feel isolated in their struggles. They feel as if faith is something they must carry alone. But in a place like St. Anthony Chapel, you are reminded that the church has always been filled with men and women who struggled, suffered, trusted, fell, rose again, and remained faithful. The saints are not there to make us feel small. They are there to remind us that God's grace can work through every age, every place, and every kind of person. This chapel also teaches a lesson about memory. Modern life forgets quickly. Attention shifts by the hour. But the church remembers. She remembers the martyrs. She remembers the holy ones. She remembers those who gave everything for Christ. In St. Anthony Chapel, memory itself becomes a form of witness, and many visitors are moved by the silence there. A relic does not speak audibly, yet it says much. It says the incarnation matters. It says the human body matters. It says grace touches real life. It says the saints were flesh and blood, and they offered that flesh and blood and love of God. In a time when faith can feel abstract, this chapel makes it concrete again. That is why it stands as a true pilgrimage site. And number 5 is Mother Cabrini Shrine in Golden, Colorado. Set against a mountainside, this shrine carries the memory of St. Francis Xavier Cabrini, the first American citizen to be canonized. Her life was one of mission, courage, endurance, and love, especially for immigrants, children, and the poor. She crossed oceans, founded schools and hospitals, and lived with a strength that did not come from comfort, but from trust in God. That spirit is still felt at the shrine today. One of the most memorable parts of visiting Mother Cabrini Shrine is the climb. A long stairway rises upward, and for many pilgrims, that physical effort becomes part of the prayer. Step by step, breathing deepens, conversation fades, and intention grows. The body joins the soul in seeking God. That matters because pilgrimage is not only about arriving somewhere. It is also about what happens along the way. The climb becomes an offering. It becomes a visible act of desire, the heart saying, I am still coming. I am still seeking. I am still trusting. At the top stands a large Sacred Heart statue with arms open over the valley. The view stretches wide, and many pilgrims stop there in silence. They bring names, worries, grief, gratitude, and hope. They look out over the land, and often they feel something inside them begin to loosen. There is something about height that changes the way people pray. The horizon opens, and somehow the heart opens too. Mother Cabrini Shrine also speaks especially to anyone who is tired from effort. We live in a culture that wants fast answers, quick results, and easier roads. But the life of Mother Cabrini says something different. It says that love often requires endurance. Real service costs something. Real faith keeps climbing even when the road is steep. The shrine does not promise an effortless journey. It teaches that some of the deepest gifts are found after the climb, not before it. There's also something profoundly encouraging in Mother Cabrini's witness. She was not powerful in the worldly sense. She did not live a life of ease. Yet she became a great force of mercy because she trusted God completely. Pilgrims leave her shrine reminded of a truth the world often forgets. You do not need status or comfort to do God's will. You need faith, courage, and love. And number 4 is El Santuario de Chimayó in New Mexico. This shrine is one of the most beloved Catholic pilgrimage sites in the United States, and many people call it a place of healing, mercy, and deep grace. Nestled in the mountains of New Mexico, it has drawn pilgrims for generations. Compared with massive basilicas, it feels humble, but that humility is part of its power. It reminds us that God often chooses simple places to pour out his mercy. The story of Chimayó is tied to a sacred tradition about a crucifix found in the earth and to the holy soil that pilgrims still take in small amounts with prayer and faith. For many, this place has become a symbol of healing. People come carrying pain of body, pain of heart, pain of memory, pain of family. Some ask for miracles. Some ask for strength. Some come because their parents or grandparents made the same pilgrimage before them. In that way, Chimayó is not only a destination. It is part of a living Catholic memory passed down from one generation to another. Every year, especially during Holy Week, pilgrims walk for miles to reach the shrine. Some come alone. Some come with family. Some come in groups, praying together. That long walk matters. It reflects something ancient and beautiful in the Catholic life. Faith is not only believed, it is walked. It is carried by tired feet, whispered prayers, aching bodies, and patient trust. By the time pilgrims arrive at Chimayó, many find that the road itself has already become part of the grace. Inside the shrine and throughout the grounds, there are visible signs of gratitude and longing. People leave prayer notes, photographs, crutches, and reminders of prayers offered and prayers answered. These signs create a powerful atmosphere. They tell every visitor, others have stood here before you. Others have cried here. Others have hoped here. Others have begged God for help here. That shared human need gives this place unusual depth. It reminds pilgrims that they are not alone in their suffering, and they are not alone in their hope. What makes Chimayó so moving is that it does not rely on grandeur. It relies on faith. The chapel is modest. The setting is simple. But the devotion is deep. And sometimes a humble place filled with deep prayer reaches the soul more than anything grand ever could. That is why El Santuario de Chimayó is one of the most powerful pilgrimage sites in America. And number 3 is Mission San Juan Capistrano in California. This is one of the most famous and beloved of the old California missions, and for good reason. Walking through its grounds feels like stepping into a place where time has not disappeared, but gently settled. Stone walls, worn paths, arches, bells, gardens, and old ruins all hold the memory of the early Catholic story in the American West. It is often called the jewel of the missions, and once you visit, that title feels well-deserved. The mission tells a story of evangelization, prayer, labor, sacrifice, beauty, and hardship. Like many historic Catholic places, it does not speak only of glory. It also speaks of struggle and complexity. That honesty gives it depth. Visitors do not encounter a polished legend. They encounter a place shaped by real people, real communities, and real perseverance. One of the reasons San Juan Capistrano feels so moving is that both nature and memory seem alive there. The gardens soften the old stone. The bells call the mind back to slower rhythms. And of course, the famous return of the swallows each year has given the mission a special place in the hearts of many people. That return feels almost symbolic. Life comes back. Memory comes back. Pilgrims come back. And that says something important about faith itself. Faith grows through return. We return to prayer. We return to confession. We return to Massachusetts. We return to the Lord. San Juan Capistrano teaches that lesson quietly. It invites people not to rush through, but to linger, to sit, to remember, to let the place speak. This mission also matters because it connects pilgrims to the roots of Catholic life in the Western United States. It tells a story larger than one building. It tells of a faith carried across oceans, planted in new soil, and lived out by generations who shaped the land around them. To visit it is to remember that the Catholic story in America is older and richer than many people realize. Mission San Juan Capistrano is not merely a historic landmark. It remains a spiritual witness. At number 2 is the National Shrine of Our Lady of Champion in Wisconsin. This place holds a unique honor in the United States. It is the site of the only Marian apparition in the country that has received church approval. In 1859, a young woman named Adele Breeze reported seeing the Blessed Virgin Mary, who called her to pray for the conversion of sinners and to teach children what they must know for salvation. Adele responded with her life. She became a catechist, taught the young, and gave herself completely to that mission. Because of that simple and faithful yes, this quiet place in Wisconsin became one of the most important Marian pilgrimage sites in America. What makes the shrine so powerful is the simplicity and clarity of its message. Mary did not come with confusion. She came with direction. Pray, teach, seek conversion. Those words are just as needed now as they were then. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and mixed messages, the shrine offers something pure and steady. Its peace is not empty. It is full of purpose. The grounds of the shrine help shape that experience. There are prayer paths, a chapel, places for reflection, and a quiet that helps the heart hear more clearly. It does not depend on spectacle. In fact, one of its greatest strengths is its simplicity. The message itself is the treasure. Many pilgrims come to Champion carrying prayers for their children, grandchildren, and loved ones who have drifted from the faith. That feels especially fitting because the apparition itself was tied to teaching and passing on the faith. For parents, grandparents, catechists, and anyone concerned for the next generation, this shrine offers a special kind of comfort. It reminds them that heaven sees the struggle. It reminds them that prayer matters. It reminds them that one faithful person can make a difference far beyond what they see. There's another reason this shrine touches people so deeply. It shows the power of hidden obedience. Adele Breeze was not famous in the worldly sense. She simply said yes to Mary and kept saying yes. Through that quiet faithfulness, a place of grace was planted for future generations. Many pilgrims leave Champion strengthened by that truth. They may not be called to public greatness, but they are called to faithfulness. And faithfulness, even when hidden, can bear fruit far beyond one lifetime. And now we come to number 1, the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis in Missouri. If there's one place on this list that overwhelms the eyes and lifts the soul at the same time, it is this one. For many people, it is one of the most breathtaking sacred spaces, not only in America, but in the world. The moment you step inside, it feels as though the entire interior is alive. Mosaics cover the walls, arches, and ceilings in a vast display of biblical scenes, saints, symbols, and sacred history. Color, light, and meaning surround you from every direction. It does not feel like decoration. It feels like entering a vision. One of the most striking things about the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis is how it changes people the moment they look up. Conversation softens. Steps slow down. Eyes widen. Even those who enter as curious visitors often fall into silence. That is one of the marks of true sacred beauty. It does not merely impress. It awakens awe. And awe has power. It reminds the human heart that there are realities greater than itself, higher than itself, and more lasting than its daily concerns. But what makes this cathedral number one is not beauty alone. It is the way beauty serves faith. The images throughout the basilica tell the story of salvation. They teach with color and light. They make the truths of the Catholic faith visible to the eye. In that way, the cathedral becomes a kind of open book, written not in ordinary paragraphs, but in sacred art. That matters in every age, but perhaps especially now, in a world flooded with shallow images that vanish as quickly as they appear. This cathedral offers images that endure, images that teach, images that lift the soul upward. There's also something profoundly Catholic in the patience behind this place. Great beauty usually takes time. It requires vision, labor, sacrifice, skill, and the belief that God deserves the very best that human hands can offer. The mosaics of this cathedral reflect exactly that kind of offering. They say that truth deserves permanence. They say that worship deserves beauty. They say that the house of God should help lift the hearts of the faithful toward heaven. For pilgrims, the experience of this cathedral is both physical and spiritual. The eyes rise, the body slows, the breath changes. But while the senses are filled, the heart is also drawn deeper into prayer. The beauty does not distract from God. It leads toward Him. It makes people want to kneel. It makes people want to thank Him. It makes people want to bring Him their lives again. That is the sign of sacred art at its best. It does not end in admiration. It opens into worship. The Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis stands at number one because it gathers together so much of what pilgrimage should be. It offers beauty, reverence, silence, teaching, wonder, and prayer. It reminds visitors that Catholic faith is not only about duty or memory. It is also about glory, truth, and the lifting of the soul. To stand inside this cathedral is to feel, even for a moment, that the world is larger, brighter, and more filled with meaning than we often remember. And when you look back over all 10 of these places, something beautiful becomes clear. Catholic pilgrimage in the United States is not one single kind of experience. In Iowa, you find a vow turned into beauty. In Arizona, you find prayer rising from the desert cliffs. In Alabama, you find holiness built from the humble and overlooked. In Indiana, you find learning and worship held together. In Pennsylvania, you find a witness of saints kept close. In Colorado, you find effort, courage, and trust on a mountain path. In New Mexico, you find healing and mercy in a humble shrine. In California, you find memory and mission preserved in old stone. In Wisconsin, you find Mary's call to prayer and teaching. And in Missouri, you find a cathedral that shines like a glimpse of heaven. Each place speaks differently, but all of them say the same thing in the end. God is still meeting people. Grace is still being sought. Faith is still alive. And holy places still matter, because human hearts still need peace, mercy, healing, forgiveness, and hope. That is why pilgrimage remains so powerful. It draws us out of routine and reminds us of eternity. It lets us carry our burdens somewhere holy and often return lighter than before. Maybe one of the places on this list stirred something in you. Maybe you have already visited one. Maybe there is one you have always wanted to see. Or maybe this journey made you realize that your soul has been longing for a place like this without even knowing how to say it. If that is true, do not ignore it. Sometimes the desire to go to a holy place is itself a grace. It is the heart remembering that it was made for more than stress, schedules, and survival. It was made for God. And even if you never visit all 10 of these places, their stories still have something to teach. They remind us that holiness can appear in deserts, mountains, small towns, quiet gardens, old mission walls, and shining cathedrals. They remind us that God works through promises, suffering, patient labor, beauty, obedience, and simple faith. They remind us that the church in America carries a sacred story of its own. So if this journey touched your heart, do not let it end too quickly. Stay with that feeling for a moment. Think about the place that moved you most. Picture yourself there. A candle burning, a quiet chapel, a steep stairway, a prayer path, a church full of light, a humble shrine in the mountains. Ask yourself what you would bring there. What burden? What gratitude? What hope? What person's name? What prayer? Because that is what pilgrimage is in the end. It is not only going somewhere holy. It is bringing your life to God in a deeper way. Thank you for traveling through these sacred places with me. And if there is a Catholic pilgrimage site in the United States that has touched your life and was not on this list, remember this. Pilgrimage is also a story shared from one believer to another. There are many holy places, many stories, many paths of grace. But every true pilgrimage leads in the same direction, away from noise, away from distraction, and closer to the heart of God. And maybe your next step, whether it is across the country or simply deeper into prayer, is the journey your soul has been waiting for.